Let's start by taking the wheel off, 19mm socket, take off all 5 of your lug nuts. And remove the wheel. Next, I want to take this drum off. It's pretty stuck on here, so I sprayed some rust penetrant around the studs and around the hub here. I'm going to take 2 8x125 bolts, and you can try hammering it. I've already tried, it's not coming off. So what I'm going to do with these is drive the bolts in, press up against the hub surface, and that will actually pull the drum off. So I'm going to thread those on. As you can see, it's working. There we go. Okay, now take the drum, slide it right off. All right, so we have this spring right here. Grab it with some locking pliers, that way it doesn't go flying. Pull it down and unlock it. Now you can unwedge it from that little adjuster arm. Now you grab this top spring with some locking pliers. You can see I'm prying it away just so I can grab it with locking pliers, otherwise it's pressed up against the shoe. Pull it out of the locking hole and take it out completely. Now spread the shoes apart. You can take out the adjuster, which makes sure you keep it in the same direction and you remember how it goes. It's important. That little piece needs to stay in there as well. Get that little adjuster arm out as well, and again, remember the way it goes. Now use a pry bar and a hammer and just punch those little clips off. That'll unlock the shoes off of the little locking pins. That's probably the best way to do it and the easiest. Now you can pry the shoes apart and down, take out the lower spring out of their mounting locations, and now let's separate the parking brake cable off of this lever. You just pull it away and it has a slot on the side that it comes out of. There's your shoe. Okay, now take the little pins out. I'm going to clean those up a little bit, but set those aside. And now we can use some brake parts cleaner and clean off the backing plate, especially those little areas where the shoes ride. It's important to have that clean, and we'll re-lubricate it after. Let's get the parking brake cable into this new shoe. Pull the spring back and try to squeeze it into the groove there, just like that. Perfect. Now let's get this bottom spring that goes in there. And remember, the spring part went on this rear pad, just like that. And then the other side hooked into this narrower slot here, just like that. Before we put the shoes in, I want to put some grease on these spots here where the shoes actually ride. You don't want a lot of grease. Of course, you don't want it to melt and fling everywhere. I mean, it shouldn't melt. You're supposed to use brake grease, but either way, you don't want a lot, just enough to coat the surface and enough to allow the shoes to slide easily with no squeaking or any sort of issues. So we'll just do this to all 6 areas where the pads sit. And then I actually like to put some on the bottom here where they kind of hook in, as well as on the top, on the wheel cylinder. That'll just lubricate the area and again prevent any potential noises and will help things work smoother. Put in the pin. I clean it up in the wire wheel so it could be nice and smooth. And put your shoe back in, and then the pin goes through this wide opening here. Make sure that it sits in where it needs to. And then to put this in, I'm actually going to push the shoe all the way back. Okay, slide it in, and now the shoe is actually sitting back in this groove, so I'm going to pull it forward and make sure this doesn't shoot out because this does separate. Okay, pull it forward, make sure it's sitting where it needs to. That's locked in. Now take this other shoe, make sure the spring goes over this area, slide it in here. Again, just like the other one, I'll put it in the groove. Take the pin, slide it through the hole. With the shoe in the groove, you have extra slack on this spring here for the pin. Now pull it up and into position, just like that. Perfect. Now let's get the top spring in. Let's take apart this adjuster, pull this larger piece off, then take this off, and remember that it goes with this swoop towards the larger piece. Then unthread this nut, which will expose all the threads. You don't actually have to take it off all the way, but enough to grease these threads up. You want this to slide smoothly for a while until the next brake service. So thread this back on. And I like to bring it in almost all the way. Wipe off any excess grease. And add a little more here because the thread's pretty much wiped it all off. Take this piece, slide it on, and now take this longer piece, which is not threaded, put it on, and make sure that this tab right there matches up with the cutout on this longer piece. Has a cutout on either side, so it doesn't matter which way as long as it matches up. Now let's put this in between the two shoes. Put this adjuster arm in first, and it hooked onto this lower pin, and then this top pin acts like a little stopping point for it. But just let it rest there, and then the adjuster slides on like this. It has, I should probably show you, has a little step down here and here. That's so that it can go around this adjuster arm on that side. So put it in like this. And then, since I compressed it all the way, I can easily slide it on. Perfect. Take the top spring, put the shorter piece towards the front, and then the longer spring towards the back. I'm going to grab it on nice and tight with my locking pliers. Try to go towards the base of the hook there so that the rest of the hook can actually fall into the hole. Nice and tight, and stretch it out. Set it in. It's not seated all the way, so we'll grab a screwdriver. Grab a screwdriver and a hammer or pry bar and just bonk it into place. There you go. That's seated. Perfect. One last thing to put on is the spring that activates this lever. I'm going to hook this onto the bottom first, just like that, and then lock my locking pliers on it. I'm going to bring this up through the hole, unlock them, and there you have it. Take the drum, slide it on, and I'm going to use some brake parts cleaner, clean out this inside braking surface here. These are coated with oil from the factory, that way it doesn't rust, and of course you want to take that oil off before you actually use your brakes. So I'll use that brake parts cleaner in a rag, wipe it off, and now let's put a little bit of anti-seize on the hub before I actually fully install it. You mainly have to focus on this outer ridge and this inner ridge here. That's what actually contacts the drum. The middle, you can put it on, but it'll most likely just be there for rust prevention because it doesn't actually touch in the middle. Now that coated with anti-seize, let's put the drum on and see how we have to alter the adjustment to make it work. It's either too tight or I'm not lining it up properly. I'm going to go with it's too tight. So let's loosen up on this adjuster. I actually did push it out a couple threads. So let's loosen up on it. Take your screwdriver, pry bar, pull the lever out. That way you unlock it and then close this in. Let's try this again. Okay, that fits on a lot better, but now the drum is loose, so I went too far, of course. Let's take this back off and expand the shoes a little bit. Take your pry bar, go the opposite direction. This time you don't have to hold on to this lever unless you want to, but you don't have to because it'll ratchet one way, just not the other. Okay, let's go a few clicks, see what that does. Usually a couple of clicks go a long way when it comes to adjusting brakes. Okay, this is definitely a little bit more snug. That's perfect right there, actually. So basically what you're looking for is when the drum is on and the shoes are properly adjusted, you can hear them touch, which you can. Right there, they're touching at all times. That's perfect. You don't want them on and off, on and off. And then the way to actually test it is spin it. And after about 1.5 rotations, it should stop by itself, which it does, so that's perfect. Let's get the wheel back on. Start on all of your lug nuts, bottom them out, and torque them to 100 foot-pounds.